I'm Adam Hart Davies, and I write books, I take photographs, and I present radio and television programmes. And science. I've always loved science. I was turned on to it at school, probably when I was about 10, by a Canadian maths teacher, Mr. Turner. He was a lovely man. And when I was leaving the school, he summoned me. He said, "Hart Davies," and I said, "Yes, sir." And "Hart Davies, I have one thing to say to you." And I said, "Yes, sir." And he said, "Science." The fact that I remember that, and that was 55 years ago, suggests to me it was rather important. That's what I've been doing all my life, trying to explain science in words of one syllable, because it doesn't need to be complicated. You don't need to use great long words. One of the problems with most scientists, or many scientists, is that they speak in their own jargon. They get used to using long, complicated words. And, that makes it more difficult for other people to understand it. There's an enzyme, for example, that we need to digest the sugars that you find in beans. It's called alpha-D-galactopyranose. Now, nobody knows that word. It's ridiculous. You could just say an enzyme. Enzyme is a difficult enough word. I believe in keeping things simple. I think if I keep things simple, then anyone can understand it. And basically, I know that the people who watch my programmes are children of all ages, from 5 to 95, and that's fine. We don't all need to have a mental age of 8. We need some sort of bright, intelligent adults as well, but I'm not one of them. And then I'm doing all sorts of... other things. I love clocks. This is a clock, an American clock, that was given to my dad, and I inherited from him, and it has to be wound every day, and it does make a wonderful noise. I'm very fond of it. It keeps rather good time too. The best thing the Romans did for us was build straight roads. The best thing the Tudors did for us was build some wonderful buildings like Hampton Court. The Stuarts invented money, or at least they invented the Bank of England. The Greeks. The Greeks invented mathematics, democracy, music. Wonderful. They invented civilization as we know it. The Egyptians invented mummies. Mind you, we must always have had mummies, mustn't we? But they invented ways of embalming people. If I had to go back in time, the place I'd like to go back to would be now. Go back even weeks and you just think how rotten, no, not weeks, go back a few years and you think how awful the food would be. Go back to Victorian times, you wouldn't be able to have avocados, you wouldn't be able to have bananas, and the lavatories would smell, it'd be revolting. I began to get interested in lavatories when we did a piece in Local Heroes about Thomas Crapper, who was a Yorkshireman who set up his own plumbing business in London in 1861. It was very successful. In fact, it's still running today. And downstairs I have a reproduction Thomas Crapper High Flush Suite. Now, when we did this thing, it was great fun, but when it went out on telly, people got really interested and asked loads of questions. And so my partner Sue said, "Why don't you write a book about lavatories?" And so I did. And here it is. It's up here. It's called Thunder, Flush and Thomas Crapper. There we are. And it's all about the history and technology of lavatories. And I actually offered the publisher 4 books. I offered him an encyclopedia, an encyclopedia, an encyclopedia, and enfata. And they refused, but I'm glad to say the sequel has just come out, and that is Taking the Piss. And my favourite loo is actually one in the woods in Herefordshire. I like to go there every summer and make a chair or something like that. And there are no buildings there, and there's a wonderful compost toilet. My least favourite loo in the world is at Kyustendil in Bulgaria at the railway station. And you go underneath the platform and it's pitch dark and there's liquid on the floor. I won't go any further than that. Astronauts have great difficulty, and it's all described in Thunder, Flush and Thomas Crapper. There is a sort of device. Anyway, if you want to poo, you sit on the top of this thing, you open the hatch obviously, you take your trousers down, you pull the curtain across in front of you, you sit on the top, and then the first thing you do that is very important is that there are 2 levers and you pull them across over your thighs. Remember, you're weightless, you do not want to float away in the middle of this operation. Right, then you go, and of course the next problem is the stuff doesn't fall away because there's no gravity. So there are jets of air, actually 11 jets of air coming up around this to actually peel the stuff away from you. But the air is icy cold. And then it goes down inside and it's spun to the outside by this rotating drum, and it's freeze-dried in there, and that's very successful until they'd been up for about a week, and they discovered it got so dry that bits began to flake off and float around the cabin. Well, even that might not have mattered, except they were in the habit of flicking peanuts to one another. And after a bit, the only way they could tell what was by the taste. I think in the old days we needed religion because it was very hard to understand why things happened, why the sun came up every day, why it got cold in the winter and so on. And the simple answer is God did it. God brings the sun up every day, God makes it cold in the winter, and that's very simple. And if you believe in God, that's a complete explanation. Nowadays we can explain virtually everything that goes on in much straighter scientific terms. It gets cold in the winter because the Earth is tilted, and so when we're tilted away from the sun, we get less sun, and more heat radiates into space, and we get colder, and so on and so forth. And the sun doesn't go around the Earth; the Earth actually spins on its axis, so the sun comes into view every 24 hours. I think science is not only important, but really interesting. I find it endlessly fascinating. And I hope that all kids will do some science and that many kids will do lots of science, partly because it's just intriguing and it really grips you and gets you going, and partly because we need scientists to solve the world's problems, to sort out global warming, to sort out all the diseases and bird flu and all that sort of stuff. So please, kids, go on, get into science and enjoy it.